Steel wires were already in use in the early 1960s in movies such as Mary Poppins. And even today, they're regularly used, like in the film Magnificent Desolation, precisely to replicate the lunar walks of the Apollo missions. Connected to a sophisticated system of pulleys and counterweights, steel wires allow the astronaut to reduce his weight until a perfect simulation of the lunar gravity is achieved. While they are normally invisible to the camera, they may get hit by the light at a particular angle, making them momentarily visible on the screen. And this is exactly what seems to have happened in the sequence from Apollo 14. While the astronauts are busy near the LEM, at one point some flashes of light can be seen above the head of one of them. The initial flash is certainly caused by the antenna mounted on the backpack. This antenna, which is about 1 foot long, often reflects the light that hits it. But then there is a second flash, right above the first one, which cannot be attributed to the antenna, and looks exactly like one caused by a steel wire. Let's watch again in slow motion. This is the contour of the astronaut with the backpack on his shoulders. This is the antenna causing the first flash of light. And this is the second flash of light, definitely above the first one, which cannot be ascribed to the antenna. There is something else reflecting the light, some 3 feet above the astronaut's head. And this something cannot be a flare in the lens from the first flash, because the second flash occurs after the first one and not simultaneously. A similar case occurs during the Apollo 17 mission. Here, too, we see a double flash of light from the antenna, and then another flash, much higher, right above the astronaut's head. In this case, this cannot be a flare inside the lens either, because the flash above occurs after the ones below, and not simultaneously. There is something else reflecting the light, a few feet above the astronaut's head, in a space that should be totally void of objects of any kind. What we have just shown you are the original, non-converted videos by Spacecraft Films. Furthermore, the flashes of light aren't the only thing suggesting that steel wires were used in the scenes from the moon. There are also several instances in which the astronauts seem to be rising from the ground with no effort whatsoever, as if some invisible force were pulling them up. Let's analyze some of these situations. This astronaut is leaning on the ground, and then he suddenly gets up with no apparent effort. It's as if a mysterious force were suddenly pulling him up from the ground. Here, the astronaut is suddenly pulled upwards and then remains dangling while rotating on himself. Let's watch it again. Here, the astronaut is first pulled up and then seems to remain floating in midair. It looks like a puppet hanging from some invisible strings. Here, the fallen astronaut gets up from the ground as if a mysterious force were pulling him up through his backpack. Let's watch it again from up close. Here, the astronaut is working with some tools when suddenly a mysterious force yanks him upwards and to his right. Let's watch it again. In this case, the astronaut falls forward, but somehow remains suspended in midair. In fact, if we look more closely, we notice that he first remains floating in midair, then a mysterious force pulls him upwards. Here we have a case of apparent levitation. The astronaut on the left takes a leap forward and then remains floating in midair, his legs dangling, while a strange force pulls him upwards. Let's watch it again in slow motion. And finally, here's a very curious situation. Look at the movement the astronaut manages to make with both his legs, first forward and then backwards, without leaning onto anything. It's as if his feet were free to slide, first forward and then backwards, on the ground underneath. If we straighten the frame in order to place the astronaut vertically, we will see that he is not just lifting himself on his toes. The entire lower part of the leg from the knee down is sliding forwards, then backwards. But how is it possible to slide with both feet at the same time, first forward and then backwards, without an external force pulling you upwards in the meantime? Question. Given that these are not artifacts from video conversion, nor are they glares inside the lens, can you explain what these flashes of light sometimes appearing over the head of the astronauts actually are? Can you explain how it is possible to make a movement such as this one, or this one, without some kind of external force pulling you upwards?